Hello. I just thought I'd want to say how great God is and how wonderful you lot are. Many of you know that our son has had Crohn's disease for 30 years. And 2 weeks ago, on Monday, he went in for major abdominal surgery. It was a 6.5-hour operation, and he was expected to be in hospital for 2 weeks, and then a 6 to 8 week recovery period. The surgery went incredibly well, and through your prayers and the prayers of his church and the goodness of God, he had the surgery on a Monday, and he was out of hospital on the Friday. And he, I have to say, on the Friday when we first saw him, he looked better than he's looked for 20 years. So I just say thank you for you, and thank you to God. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Norman. Now I'm going to just chat to a few people now. So I'm going to invite Fortune and Adrian, and John to come forward. Come and just line up for me, guys and girl. I've not got the stools out because I always get told off when I interview people on the stools because no one's feet can reach the ground. So give these people a welcome as they come forward. So what I thought would be good is just to talk a little bit about Christmas around the world, because we are blessed to have people from different parts of the world with us here in Penzance. So we've got John, who was born and brought up in Zimbabwe. We've got Fortune, who was born and brought up in Nigeria. And Adrian, who was born and brought up in France. So I thought it'd be lovely just to tell us a little bit, just really briefly, about what Christmas was like growing up, like any particular customs of your nation, any particular things you ate that maybe you miss now, or that you are now inflicting upon your children here.
Christmas dinner could be a bit of a mix. So for some of us, it was roast turkey, a bit of the English tradition. But for some of us, it was a barbecue, because it was middle of summer, which is quite nice. Or for some people, it was the local dish called sadza na muriwo, which is a maize-based dish, which is quite fun. But probably the big thing that was different was Christmas trees. So we're not great at growing conifers out there, because it's the middle of the sort of sub-Saharan Africa. So what we'd do is, coming up to Christmas every year, you would get loads of people, industrious people, who would come and offer to cut people's conifer hedges. So they would just take the top off all these hedges and go and put them on the side of the road, and tie them all up together and sell them as Christmas trees. So everyone's Christmas trees was the hedge toppings.
Nice. Thanks, John. Fortune.
I think the most important thing for us at Christmas is the fact that everybody travels back from wherever you are, back home. So it's really time spent with family. And Christmas Day is really food for everybody. So typically, I don't have to cook on Christmas Day. I just eat everywhere, in everybody's house, the whole day. So I can leave my house as early as 6 in the morning, go to church service is over, and then I just spend the time out eating everywhere till 6 p.m. My parents don't look for me. They just know where, they know I'm somewhere eating somewhere in the neighborhood. I play it and just come back in the evening, and we're fine, yeah. And like Zimbabwe, no Christmas trees, not much, because once again, we don't have not much decoration really, just mostly the food and the fun and family time, basically, yeah.
And Fortune, what would you normally eat? What's like traditional Christmas food?
Oh, well, food is different in every part of Nigeria, really. We have plenty kinds of cultural dish, but one thing you find in every household is rice. Rice is a staple in Nigeria, so it's party jollof rice. So you have rice in almost every household, and then local foods, yam-based, legumes, every kind, but really you will definitely find rice, and then you find all kinds of meats, from chicken to beef to ram to sheep to goats, every kind you just find. Yeah, so that's basically it.
Just anything you can find. Just eat it. Yeah,
yes, really, anything you can find.
Brilliant, thank you.
Yeah, I think I'm going to be a bit more boring because my parents are not really traditional. So for me, Christmas when I grew up was much more about the presents. But New Year was much more about the food. New Year was more exciting with food, and yeah, we would have canapés or canapé. But yeah, it was quite funny because
Was that
That's the
canapes?
normal pronunciation. That's my pronunciation. Anyway, not going to argue about it. But yeah, it was quite funny because when we got married, the first Christmas, then Liz was like, well, what do you have for Christmas? And I was like, I don't really know what we have for Christmas. I mean, the normal traditional is turkey, but it's stuffed, turkey stuffed with chestnuts in France, anyway. But in my parents, they don't really do that, so I wasn't really sure. And I looked up online, and also, yeah, so normally it was more like towards like seafood, like could be like crab or anyway. And but obviously with Liz that wasn't going to work. So I looked up online, and we ended up with having a capon, which was really nice. So if you don't know what a capon is, basically a big turkey, a big chicken, big fat chicken, basically. But yeah, we had seafood with my parents, but that was a bit more later on, more in my 20s, really.
Fantastic. So back to John. Is there anything from Zimbabwe that you miss about Christmas from here? And then also, how do you say Happy Christmas in your mother tongue? Or just make it up? Because I don't think, apart from your dad, no one else will know.
My dad certainly wouldn't know, but anyway. So the things that I miss, being 25 degrees, sitting in your shorts out for Christmas lunch is definitely a plus. I have no idea how you'd say it in China, if I'm perfectly honest. So,
Well, there we are. Fortune, anything you miss, and how do you say it in your native language?
I think one thing I will miss is family time, because really, if I was back home in Nigeria, about this time, I'd have packed my bags and left home and spend the time with family back home in the village. So cousins, siblings, from everywhere you are in the whole world will definitely come back home for Christmas. So yeah, I definitely miss spending time with family this Christmas. And Christmas is still Christmas back home. There's no special way we say Christmas. It's still Christmas, yeah.
Cool. Adrian.
Yeah, so also, yeah, it's, obviously the Christmas log. I think French ones are a bit better than the, anyway.
You can say it, it's all right.
But yeah, family, and also what I like is in Paris, obviously, there's a special feel with Christmas, with the shops, the decorations, the Christmas markets, things like that. That's quite fun, yeah, quite special.
Oh, fantastic. We were going to interview Denise as well. Denise is from Brazil, but she's not very well today. And her main thing was the 25-degree heat. She messaged me and just said, the thing most about Christmas that I miss, and is Brazilian, was 25 degrees all the time. Guys, thank you so much for sharing with us this morning. Give them a round of applause. So, I want to just share kind of a few thoughts. It's interesting when you think about Christmas, like around the world, and all the different sort of traditions that we have, isn't it? There's some traditions that we have in Britain that have, we think they're very British, but actually they've come from other countries. So the Christmas tree, anyone know where the Christmas tree kind of originates from, like in your house? Shout it out. The ground, yeah. Not like where do they grow, like, because they grow, obviously, like, but where did they start bringing them inside and decorating them? Germany, they reckon. Germany was where they first started doing it. What about Turkey? Anyone know kind of where having turkey for a celebratory meal originates from? America, yeah. Turkeys aren't really British. They weren't really around before. Pigs in blankets. Anyone know? Tesco, do you say? Yeah. So apparently, Germany or Czech, that kind of area again. Cranberry sauce? America, yeah, North America, maybe Nova Scotia around there, that kind of place. So there's things that we have that we think, oh, they're really British, but actually they've come from all over the world. But then there are some things from around the world that don't really translate into Britain very well, that we're not perhaps so keen on. So if you were to go to Catalonia in Spain, you would see quite often, apparently, around a nativity scene, there'd be a nativity scene, and then on the side would be a person going to the toilet. There it is. So there's the nativity scene, and there's a little chap on the right-hand side going to the loo. So they like that in Catalonia, apparently, in Spain. Now, that doesn't really translate into Britain very well, does it? You couldn't imagine doing that as part of your nativity scene. My brother-in-law is Portuguese, and their Christmas day, they had it sort of do Christmas Eve, really, they would have salted cod with some, like, boiled eggs and olives. Now, if you were to wrap it in batter, deep fry it, and serve it with chips, then I think we might be in business. But, it just doesn't seem to fit for us in Britain, doesn't seem to translate very well. And I was just kind of thinking about how things translate between cultures and languages and how it can be easy to misunderstand and misinterpret and, all that kind of stuff. I was reminded of something, I've shown this before actually, some instructions that came with a projector screen that we used to use in the church. I'm not expecting you to read it from there. But we had a projector screen. These were the instructions that came with it. And it said a few things on it. Here's one. It said, don't let children keep in touch with the screen. Don't let them keep in touch, right? No writing letters. If has not grasped operation method, unexpected thing may take place. It sounds quite exciting to me. That never happened with the projector screen. An unexpected thing never took place. It said, please don't shave the screen surface with the hard thing. I don't know if they had a particular hard thing in mind or just any, but that's what it said. It actually says pies. It's an I rather than an L. And then it says pies, use dry soft or soft hairs brush sassafras, gently shed the dirty of the screen superficial. I don't even know what sassafras was even trying to say. And the thing with that is that they were probably written perfectly in their original language, and then they've been translated by someone who doesn't speak English properly. So nowadays, they'd probably put it through AI and it would all be amazing, but this was a few years ago, and somebody has probably translated it, but they didn't speak English, and so it's gone a bit awry. Now, you probably know that for yourselves. If you ever go on holiday somewhere and you don't speak the language, it's really hard to get by. Obviously, for those of us who are English, what do we do in another language? Shout, obviously. Shout slowly, because we feel that somehow that they should speak English, so therefore let's just shout and do it slowly. But it can be hard sometimes to be understood and to communicate. And you might say, actually, in some ways, that that's what the first Christmas was all about. That's kind of what it was about. When the greatest piece of translation work that's ever happened in history took place. Because God, who is amazing and huge and massive and up there and beyond us, became something that we could understand. Because he became a human. Have a look at this verse from the Bible. It's from Matthew 1:23. It said, the virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. God with us. They are the three most amazing words you will ever hear in your life. God with us. That was his name, Emmanuel. When Jesus was born at that first Christmas, 2,000 or so years ago, he translated God into a language that we could understand, so that we could make sense and understand who he is. He translated his love into a language that we could understand. And he showed us what God looks like, because Jesus is God. He showed us who God is. Now, sometimes people have a perception of who God is, or what God is like, and quite often he's a bit angry and a bit aloof. If you put God into Google and then search up images, you come up with all sorts of like weird things. He's always kind of old, he's got a beard or something. He's quite often a bit angry, he's kind of a bit aloof. I never really understand why God is portrayed as old, because I would have thought the point about being eternal is that you don't get old. Not that you're just old for a long time, but that's how they sort of seem to come up with it. So we end up with this kind of mashup between Father Christmas, Gandalf, and Captain Birdseye, as if that's somehow what God looks like. Jesus' disciples were wondering the same thing. Like, what's God look like? And one of them, called Philip, asked this question to Jesus. He said, show us the Father, show us God, and that will be enough for us. So they have this conversation, and it goes backwards and forwards a little bit. And Jesus replies with this. He says, don't you know, Philip, anyone who has seen me has seen the Father. If you've seen me, you've seen God. That's what Jesus said. Jesus has shown us what God is like. He's shown us who God is. So when you look at Jesus and when you read about him in the New Testament, you are looking at God himself. So he's not angry. He's not aloof. He's not grumpy. He's not old. But he's kind. He's forgiving. He's merciful. He's wise. He's gracious. He's loving. He's welcoming. He touches people that no one else would touch. He goes near people that everyone else would avoid. He welcomes people that other people would turn away. He's a friend of sinners. He's a friend of people who make an absolute mess of life. He loves to eat and drink with people. He loves to chat and to laugh. He loves to cry and to get alongside people. He loves to put his arms around people. He's the person you would most want to spend time with. He's the person that if you went to a party and they turned up, you would be pleased he was there. That's why crowds gathered around him. And ultimately, if you really want to know what God looks like, then you look at this scene, this nativity scene, because it tells us so much about this God, about who he is. Now, I've got 3 daughters, and they were all born in spotless maternity wards, in kind of side quiet rooms. Well, they were quiet before we got there. But anyway, in these sort of side rooms, and they're born there. And Ellie, our eldest, she was a little bit awkward coming out. It just hasn't really changed over the last 23 years, but anyway. There was instantly an immensely trained doctor on hand, and if things had gone worse, there was a spotless, state-of-the-art operating theatre just up the corridor. Everything was there that we would have needed. But Jesus was born in a cave, sort of stable type thing, with animals all around him. I'm not a big fan of animals. I don't really like stroking other people's pets, to be honest with you. If I come to your house and you've got a pet, you'll probably see me avoiding it in some way, because they're just like animals. They're a bit grubby, aren't they? We had a dog and a cat. I tried to avoid stroking them, to be honest. And I certainly don't like farm animals. You know, you go to a petting zoo, that's my idea of a nightmare. Why do I want to stroke a farm animal? They're dirty. I certainly don't want it in the room when a baby is being born. And you're all thinking, he's horrible, isn't he? What a horrible man. But anyway, let's move on. So with these animals, whether you think they're nice or not nice, it doesn't really matter. They are dirty. Farm animals are grubby. They are not where you want to have your baby. But that is where Jesus was born, right in the middle of all of that. And he was placed in a manger, which we romanticize, but it's an animal feeding trough. And we've cleaned it up in our minds, but it wasn't clean because it's what animals ate out of. He was put there because it was the only thing to keep him off the ground. And he was visited by some ragtag shepherds, this kind of group of nobodies that people didn't really like, to be honest with you. They weren't, again, we romanticize it, but people didn't like them in those days. And his arrival was greeted by child genocide by Herod the king as he tried to wipe out Jesus. Jesus started his life in the end as a refugee in Egypt, seeking temporary asylum so that he could avoid being killed by Herod. That's who our God is. That's Jesus, God with us. He's not posh. He's not above us in that sense. I mean, he is, but he's not. He's come down to earth. He's not far from us. He's holding his arms out towards us. He came to earth in this incredibly human, incredibly humble way to be God with us. And 33 years after his birth, he gave his life in an incredibly humble way so that we might be saved. That's what our God is like. That is who Jesus is. And so when the angels came and said, and Grace read it at the beginning of the service, that there will be peace on earth, they weren't primarily talking about peace between people. That's a bonus when that happens. They were talking about peace between people and God because Jesus had come. That's why he came. That's why God with us came. You see, Jesus is Emmanuel, God with us. When you look at Jesus, you are not reading a mistranslated instruction manual. You are looking at the author himself. That's who he is. You don't have to read between the lines and guess or wonder what he's like. Just read about him and you'll see who this great God is. That's what the first Christmas is all about. Emmanuel, God with us. That's what it's all about. And I guess the question then is, how will you respond to that? What are you going to do with that piece of information that Jesus is God with us? You need to work it out for yourself and just see, well, do I agree with it? You know, you've got a choice then. You can leave Jesus in the manger as a cute little baby and just say, oh, isn't that nice, little, cutesy scene. But then you're missing the point, because Jesus grew up to be a man and said a lot of things that we need to take note of. Or maybe you'll resolve to think, okay, well, I'm just going to try and be a good person because that's probably going to be all right. Well, can I say with all the love in the world that none of us will ever be good enough to please God? We'll never get there by trying to be good. That's not what it's all about. Actually, the good news is that no one's good enough. But that's why Jesus came. He came to die on the cross in our place so that we might be saved. And so I want to encourage you this Christmas to remember this God with us, that Jesus is this baby who was born, but he was God himself, come to save us, come to give us a way that we might come to know the Father, we might come to know God himself. If you want to know what God is like, look at Jesus. Can I encourage you this Christmas to read something about him? Maybe read the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John. Just read one of them, and they'll tell you a little bit about who this Jesus is and explain a bit more about him to you. The worship band are going to come back now, actually, and they're going to sing a song for us. You're going to stay seated and just listen. This song is called Manger Throne, that just speaks about this God who's come to this manger.